So you're probably familiar with Dall-E, an AI which generates images based on text inputs. Hi, my name's Bryce, and today we're going to write a Go program which creates AI-generated images using OpenAI's Image API. First, we'll go through a quick rundown of how OpenAI's APIs work. Next, we'll get to know the Image API from the command line. And finally, we're going to write our own Go program which uses AI image generation. So OpenAI's APIs are made of stateless HTTP requests. You basically send the request and then get a JSON response back. To use these APIs, you need to provide an authentication token. To get this, create a login at openai.com, and from here you can generate a token under your user profile. It's important to know that these APIs aren't free, but when you sign up, you will get some trial credit. So I'm going to start by using curl to call OpenAI's image endpoint. Firstly, I'm going to set an environment variable in here with export OpenAI key. And I'm going to set it to the key that I generated just before. So I'm going to go curl https:/api.openai.com/v1/images/generations. So that's the endpoint that we want to call, but we need to provide some additional information. I'm going to add a header here, content type application/JSON, and then a second header to include our API key. So here we're going to go with authorization bearer OpenAI key. And next we're going to add some JSON which will provide what kind of image we want to generate. Here I'm going to prompt a boss monster in pixel art. Then we also can choose a size. The default size is 1024 by 1024. I'm going to go with 256 by 256 pixels. And that's all we really need to specify for now. So I'm going to close that bracket and I'm going to pipe this through to Python JSON tool because I want it to format nicely on our command line. So if we enter that, I used the wrong endpoint. It's not image, it's images. And if we do that, maybe I spelled authorization wrong. I did too. Authorization with an O. Right, and this has generated a URL for us, and we can click on this and open it. And there is our pixel art boss monster. One thing to keep in mind is that I asked for a 256 by 256. There's actually only three sizes you can do. There's 256, 512, and 1024. Generally, when you're trying to get a prompt right to generate something that you actually like, it's a good idea to go with the smaller ones because it uses up less of your credit. So this is a bigger boss monster. You can kind of see like, yeah, it's bigger, but the quality of the pixel art isn't any better. The other cool thing you could try is jump in here and set n to 2. And it will generate two different images. End up with this image. It's got a cool staff there. Looks a bit like Ganon from Zelda. Then this is our other option, which is some kind of like devil thing, I guess. So there's a few different options you can play around with there in the API. So now I want to write some Go code which takes user input and creates an image. So we'll start with a new project with go mod init, and then we're going to create a file main.go, give it the package name main, and create a main function. So I'm going to start by defining a client, and it's a client of OpenAI.newClient, and it takes an argument of our authentication key. So I'm going to use our environment variable, so os.getInf OpenAI key. Next we're going to get some user input, so I'm going to start with s is equal to buffio.newScanner, and we're going to pass in our standard input here, and then we're going to use format to print to the console prompt because we want our user to add a prompt. So next we're going to say if s.scan fails, then we're going to panic with a message failed to get user input. If our s.scan succeeded, now we have some user input. So let's move on and make a request. So we can go with request is equal to OpenAI.image request. We have a few options. Prompt is one of them, and for prompt we're going to use s.text. And then for size, I'm just going to go with 512 by 512. We can also choose a response format. Now this is something I didn't do with curl. With curl we use the URL response format, so you get a URL which you can click on and get the image. In this case I actually want the bytes of the image. I don't want to have to make another HTTP call just to download the image separately. I'm going to go with OpenAI.base64JSON. So basically all the bytes are going to be encoded in base64, which we'll see soon. But before we get to that, we need to actually make the API call. We can use our client that we defined up here to create an image. Response error is equal to the client and then create image here. And it requires a context, and I'm just going to pass in context background because I'm not worried about cancelling this request. And then it also requires the request itself that we just created. And I'm going to say if error does not equal nil, then we should panic. And now within our response, we're going to have some base64 data that I need to decode. So I'm going to go with b error is equal to base64.standard encoding decode string. And then in here, we need to pass in the string. So I'm going to go response.data and then 0, and then base64 JSON. And again, I'm going to say if error does not equal nil, then we should panic. Otherwise, we now have the bytes of the image. So the final thing to do is to write that to a file. So I'm going to go with if error is equal to os.create to create a file, image.png, and I'm going to say if error does not equal nil, then again we're going to panic. Otherwise, we can say defer if.close, make sure that we close our files after we open them. And now we have something that we can write those bytes to. So the last thing to do is to go error is equal to if.write and pass those bytes in, and we'll say if the error does not equal nil, then we're just going to panic. So I'll save that and I'll jump back into the terminal, and now we can run this and generate an image. So I'm going to call go run, and let's see, I'm going to say a fox in a temple, and it takes a few seconds and there's a result. So if we look at this image that we generated, it's a fox in a temple. So very cool. You know, we can definitely try other prompts. Let's say an owl on a roof, and that's kind of an owl on a roof. OpenAI have a bunch of really cool AI-powered tools that we can integrate into our programs. I've been Bryson, happy image generating, and I'll see you later.